Hello, San Francisco, and welcome once again to the Angelic Troublemakers. I'm your host, Alan Jones, and on today's program, an Uncle Tom is my homeboy. Today, I'm bringing to you a term that many blacks have used, and I say they didn't know what they were saying when they used the term Uncle Tom. Where did it come from? And why is it that we're using this? There's many people who are crying for equality in the black community. But consider this. We call some bourgeois blacks. In other words, they're acting uppity or too good for us. And then we call some Uncle Toms. In other words, it's a derogatory term that many over the years have associated with blacks who are beholden to their slave master, if you will, or preferring to just be, if you'll pardon me, house niggers. Well, I came across a couple of weeks ago when I had a program and the title was The Greatest Challenge. And I explained as read it yourself is the greatest challenge. Well, then I learned of the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now, I've heard of this book, but I never had any interest in it. And definitely was not going to read it based on what I thought I knew of the book. And so I found an opportunity to watch the movie of the book. Now, Uncle Tom's Cabin is a novel by a Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was an abolitionist back during the Civil War. It is said that President Abraham Lincoln, when he met her, and because her book back then had done so well, she says, well, it's said that he said, "Oh, so you're the one who started this Civil War." Well, not exactly. Many people say that Abraham Lincoln said this, and some said, he didn't say it, and some said they heard. And so let's just say, for the sake of argument, Abraham said it. Well, it's not true. And when we look at what led up to the Civil War, it's really not true. But I'm going to talk about the term Uncle Tom. Now, we know that the worst thing that a white person can say to a black person is nigger, calling them a nigger. But the worst thing that a black person can say to another black person is not nigger. It's Uncle Tom. And the reason why is people have this belief that an Uncle Tom is one who has betrayed his race. But where did the term Uncle Tom come from? It came from this book by a white woman by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe. Now, if this white woman came up with this term, And us blacks attacking other blacks feel the need to demean our brethren by using this. I'm saying, do the math. I have never used the term Uncle Tom in describing another black person, mainly because I never understood it. I didn't know what it meant, didn't know its history, knew nothing about it. If I did say it based on what I knew of the term, it was probably, for the lack of a better description of a person. But I'm probably said it maybe twice in my life, but I don't really recall saying or calling somebody an Uncle Tom. An Uncle Tom is usually hurled by black Democrats at black Republicans. So there again, you won't. Logic says I don't use the term. Why? I'm a black Republican. Now, let's look at Harriet Beecher Stowe's book. She came up with the term Uncle Tom. She wrote this novel that was very successful during the Civil War, and it may have swayed some people against slavery, which was her intent. I'll give her credit for that. But to say that it started the Civil War is a stretch. And when you look at the fact that who the main character of the book, Uncle Tom, was, I was shocked. I did not read the book. I only saw the movie recently. And in seeing the movie recently, I'm saying, wow, we black people need to really wake up, because we are using terms, calling people this and that, and we don't even know what we're doing. We are trying to get white America to accept us, and we're not accepting ourselves. To have someone who has a differing view and you speaking to them in such a derogatory term, whether it's bourgeois blacks or Uncle Toms, is, my goodness, it's a step back. Let others use those terms, but for us to use them, But when I realized in watching this movie who this character, Uncle Tom, was, I was shocked. The main character, Uncle Tom, was a black Christian. And the theme of the movie was black people under all that you are enduring as slaves. Don't forget Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. And Uncle Tom, the character, was a man who was sold, and he had an opportunity to run, but he, in the movie and book, realized if he ran, all the other blacks on this particular plantation would have been sold. So he stayed so they wouldn't be sold. Then he went on and did all his things as a slave in the movie. And towards the end of the movie, what cost him his life? He refused, after another owner, he refused to beat a black slave who wouldn't give up sex to another slave. And this white owner was so furious, he was trying to break this black man. And The fact that he refused, Uncle Tom refused to beat this black woman with a whip. He endured the beating. Well, didn't endure the beating. They beat him to death. Black slaves did. So, for us to label the term Uncle Tom as one who betrays their race on this man who would not beat a black woman, what about the two black slaves who did beat Uncle Tom as orders from their master? Of course, they had whatever names, I don't know what it is, but to claim that Uncle Tom is such a derogatory person is misplaced. Uncle Tom should be hailed as some great person, even though it was a fictional story, and I believe that it was made up based on this woman's, Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author's, view of what she had witnessed back then. And so this Uncle Tom, who was the character, he was given that name, and in the movie, the first time that he was called Uncle Tom was his first slave master's son referred to him as Uncle Tom. And the slave owner, stick with me, felt that this Tom was like a brother to him. Go from there. Now, I highly recommend that whatever means necessary, YouTube or Netflix or whatever, that you research this and watch the hour and 20 minutes or something like that, or go read the book. And you will find that for us to be calling people who disagree with us blacks Uncle Toms, we don't know what we're talking about. We need to do our own research, because an Uncle Tom is somebody who I want to be associated with. Someone who refuses to run away just to make things better for themselves when there's a lot of other people who are depending on them. And one person who refuses just to spare their own suffering by whipping another one. My goodness. How can you call that person a lower individual? For black people who are Democrats, who have a disagreement with black Republicans, well, to say you betrayed your race, hey, some of you have given Abraham Lincoln credit for freeing slaves. Well, quite frankly, he didn't do it. And though he was the first Republican, Abraham Lincoln, and you're giving him credit for freeing the slaves, there's a contradiction here. And so I'm saying that we really need to do our own research, because I have a friend and his name is Tom. I spent 2 years in the presence of this person. And if we both died today, 40 years later, I would love to be buried next to this individual. Why? Because this, at the time, an 18-year-old white boy friend that I met named Tom, who lives in Oregon, the way he treated me is why I think so highly of him today. This white boy with blonde hair, hazel eyes, was born in Japan. But his father, who was, I think, from San Francisco, but I think he was a military Air Force guy or something like that. When he came back to the States, settled in Ohio, Iowa, somewhere right there, but he ended up in Portland. And so this young man who, when I first met him, told me he had never seen or were close to a black person. I think he said the closest he had ever seen in his 18 years was a black person like 2 or 3 blocks away. That's as close as he had ever gotten to see a black person. But from the very moment that we met, I was moving into a house and he was moving out of the house. We became fast friends. And the way he treated me, I'm telling you, it was just, hey, the way I want to be treated in every way, shape, and form. And so, sure, we did smoke weed together, and we did have an awful lot of fun. We drove from Oregon down to San Francisco and back up to Oregon one Thanksgiving. And, but this guy just was a great friend. I know that I was in love with the guy, but he was a heterosexual and is, he has a, thing going on up in Oregon. But I always think of him. And why do I always think of him? Because of the 2 years that we spent together and how our friendship was. I probably have been up to Oregon once since, and he's been down here once since. And it's something that I'll never be able to get out of my mind, because he basically treated me like I wanted to be treated. And it was just perfect. So then that brings me to my name. My father named me after a white friend of his. The person's name was Lawrence Allen. He was a friend of my father and my parents, my father and mother, in Denver, Colorado, where I was born. He thought so highly of this person that he wanted to give him my name. And I'm glad. I mean, I don't have a preference over Lawrence, nothing wrong with the name Lawrence, but I like the name Allen. Well, how did I find this out? One day I was in my father's room and we were discussing my name. And I told him why I liked my name and why I like its spelling Allen. There's many ways to spell it. But one day, I think I was maybe 16 years old, and I was looking at a Dodge Challenger. And I was going over the Dodge Challenger. It was a clean looking car. It wasn't new, but it was just clean. And I was looking at the decal of the name. And I'm 16 years old at the time, and I'm sure I've seen the word challenge before. But this time I was looking at it and I noticed something in the word challenger. Allen is right in the middle of the word challenge. And so I happen to love a challenge. So I'm describing that to my father. And so I said to him, now, this is when I discovered it. It was like 10 years later that I told him the story. And so he was sitting right across from me, and he looked up after I showed him the spelling and how the word challenge, Allen is in the name challenge. And so he looked up to me and he said, he was a white man. And I was so proud of my father, because the fact of the matter is he found somebody who was so good to him in the civil rights era that he wanted to name one of his sons after him. And I'm the one. And so I really thought very highly of my father, because he did not use the tension of the times to prevent him from doing what was in his heart. And that was to honor somebody who was white and treated him right. Now, for me to have issues with racism, I have told people, I hate no white person. I hate racism. But then I look at the fact that in the black community, if blacks are accusing some of being bourgeois, well, I don't get that. I understand how some people want to act, high class and stuff like that. But for people to accuse somebody of being an Uncle Tom, even if the label was correct, and it's not, the fact that you're saying you're black, but you're below us. In other words, if blacks are saying that they're on the bottom, to accuse some blacks of being below that is like, that's not that's not going to lift us up. So why are we doing it? Now, is it jealousy? It's perhaps. Those of us supposedly stuck in the middle, because we're not the bourgeois types way up here, and we're not the traders, which are below us, so they say. And believe me, there are some people I could imagine have felt like someone has betrayed their race based on their understanding. But I'm saying that if we, black people, really do our research, we'll find out that we are more enemies to ourselves and how we treat one another than the white man has ever been. Because there's no way in the world we are going to better our own situation by looking at other blacks who just have a difference of opinion as less than us with the term Uncle Tom. And believe me, when I say Uncle Tom is my homeboy, I must say that I'm reminded of when my father, I think this was more than 30 years ago, he was maybe late 50s, 58, somewhere around there. And he was lamenting over some of his friends who had passed on. And he was just talking about, oh, my homeboys are all going. Well, I didn't roll my eyes, but in my head I was thinking, well, how's he using this term to describe, his friends? It was a young person's term at the time. This is 30 plus years ago. And now I'm using it. And I'm saying that black Republicans, I claim that they are my homeboys. Why? Because the fact is we have a belief. And the belief is based on what we see, not just going along with the program, because a lot of the Democratic stuff that is going around that people think blacks should be all about, I just don't think that it's right. And for there to be some independent thinkers not willing, if you will, to just drink the Kool-Aid of the Democratic Party, that's my type of black man. Now, am I saying that I'm speaking down against the Democrats? And no. How I became a Republican, that's another story. But my point is that there are some things that I hold dear. And politically speaking, when you weigh it, they fall more in line with the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. However, I myself am 100% opposed to the death penalty. So you can't call me a Republican when so many Republicans are for the death penalty. You know, I myself have, there's other things that I believe in, loosened drug laws. Well, that's not a Republican trait. You know, I think this border security issue, the border wall and Donald Trump, is ridiculous. That's not a Democratic trait as far as, you know, build the wall. There's a lot of things that I just flat out reject as a human being. And the fact that Republicans view some of these things the way I do, and Democrats view some of these things, I'm not saying that I'm an independent far as politically speaking. I claim to be a Republican. And at another time, I'll probably explain it. However, when people hear me and they say, you're a Republican, and they want to throw me in the bag with all the other Republicans, well, you just go right ahead. If you think that that's who I am, you know, if you think that I voted for Donald Trump, you go right ahead. Because regardless of what you think, I'm not changing. I did not vote for Trump, and my statement on Hillary Clinton, the only good thing about Donald Trump being president is Hillary Clinton is not president. Why? I reject an awful lot of the things that Hillary Clinton did as Secretary of State of the United States, and even as First Lady under her husband, Bill Clinton, when, you know, that was it. I remember how she treated Barack Obama when the two were candidates. I do give her respect for how she treated Barack Obama after she was defeated. Nevertheless, I haven't forgot the Libya thing, Hillary, and the issue is there's an awful lot of things that I cannot be aligned with when it comes to the Democratic Party. I am embarrassed about a lot of the things that the Republican Party is doing, but that's no reason for me to run. That's a reason for me to stand for what I believe in and fight. Just like Uncle Tom. He didn't run when things got bad. He was willing to stick in there even though it meant he had to suffer. And so for that, I say, and Uncle Tom, well, Uncle Tom from the original meaning is my homeboy, because that's the type of people who I want to run around with. People who are not afraid. God bless, and until next time.